by Margaret Peterson Haddix, Chapter 13. Close it down, Jonah said. What? Why? Chip asked. Jonah stepped back from the computer far enough away that the words were just indistinct squiggles. I don't want to know anything else, he said. He felt overwhelmed suddenly, everything catching up with him at once. The strange letters, Mr. Reardon implying he could lose his citizenship and be deported, Catherine claiming she had seen a ghost, and now these lists of witnesses and survivors with Jonah's name right there in black and white. It made everything else seem like it might be real. Can't we go back to, hey, Jonah, you gonna try out for the basketball team? Jonah pleaded, like that's the most important thing. Chip and Catherine were staring at him like he'd completely lost it. Can't we pretend none of this ever happened? Jonah asked. My parents spent 13 years pretending nothing ever happened, Chip said in a hard voice. Jonah appealed to Catherine. You're the one who said I shouldn't do this whole identity searching thing, he said. You wanted me to just act normal. Catherine looked from Jonah to Chip and back again. That was before I saw the ghost, she said quietly, or whatever it was. Aren't you curious? Chip asked. Jonah shook his head. No, he said, not at all. He felt like he was still too close to the computer screen. His mind kept trying to turn the vague squiggles back into words and words into ideas. Survivors. I'm on the survivors list. What does that mean? He reminded himself that he didn't care. He bent over and picked up his jacket. Come on, Catherine, let's go home. Catherine didn't move. I used to want to be you, she said. Excuse me? Jonah asked, almost dropping his jacket in surprise. Not really you, Catherine said. I wanted to be the one who was adopted. I thought it was so boring to have mom and dad as my real parents and birth parents. I used to pretend that I was adopted and that my other parents were a king and queen or actors or singers or something exciting like that. Very nice, Jonah said sarcastically. I'm sure that little fantasy made you very happy. His hands shook as he pulled on his jacket. He stuffed them into his pockets. My other parents are probably drug dealers, he said, smugglers wanted by the FBI. Catherine shook her head. You don't know that, she said. Mr. Reardon does. No matter how hard he tried, Jonah couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. No, Catherine was staring at him. I don't think so, she said slowly. Didn't you see how Mr. Reardon was looking at you? It was like he was trying to figure you out, like he doesn't really know who you are either. Thanks a lot, Jonah said. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Catherine put her hand dramatically on Jonah's arm. Wait, she said. I think I just figured something out. Jonah waited. How stupid am I, he thought, that I'm obeying Catherine. Okay, I really think I'm right about this, Catherine said excitedly. See, part of my deal with Mom and Dad to get to go to the FBI with you was that I wasn't allowed to say anything while we were there. They actually thought you could go 3 seconds without talking, Jonah asked. I didn't talk, Catherine said indignantly. Jonah considered this. He hadn't noticed at the time, but now he thought about it. He couldn't remember Catherine saying anything in Mr. Reardon's office, just gasping. And it's kind of funny, Catherine went on, but when you're not talking, sometimes you notice things more, and I kept thinking that Mr. Reardon was acting weird. No, duh, Jonah said. Catherine ignored him. I kept thinking, why'd he agree to meet with us just to tell us he couldn't tell us anything? And I think, she dropped her voice low, conspiratorially, I think it was because he wanted to find out what Mom and Dad already knew. You mean he thought your family knew something about the FBI that the FBI didn't? Chip asked. He spun around from the computer screen that was staring up at Catherine as if she had all the answers. Maybe, Catherine said, back to her normal voice. Or he was afraid that we already knew some of that top secret information he didn't want anyone to know. Didn't you notice how it was almost like he was trying to get Mom and Dad mad? You know how when people are mad, sometimes they say things they don't mean to. They reveal too much. That's what Mr. Reardon wanted Mom and Dad to do. Chip was squinting at Catherine. How does that explain the ghost? He asked. That? I haven't figured out yet, Catherine said with a little laugh. But I will. She made the whole mess sound as if it was just a challenging math problem, or as if she was working on a scheme to get Mom and Dad to let her stay up late on a school night or have nothing but ice cream for dinner. This was just an intriguing puzzle to her. It wasn't her life. Whatever, Jonah said, jerking his arm away from Catherine's grasp. You can stay here until you figure everything out. I'm going home. He half expected Catherine to follow him out. She was his sister, after all, not Chip's friend. But when he glanced back, they'd both turned around to huddle over the computer together. Fine, Jonah thought, see if I care. When he'd climbed up the stairs to the first level of Chip's house, he could hear a TV blaring from the family room. A woman, presumably Chip's mom, said unhappily, You always have to watch the Blood and Guts show. Jonah thought about walking back toward the family room, poking his head in and informing Chip's parents, You really ought to know what's going on down in your basement. Chip's looking for a whole other identity that doesn't involve you. Instead, he turned through the dark dining room and slipped out the front door. Outside, a new thought occurred to him. Chip had pretty much admitted that he had a crush on Catherine. What if Catherine had a crush on Chip, too? What if that's what this was all about? Unaccountably, Jonah suddenly felt very lonely. He was walking down a dark street all by himself, the trees casting eerie shadows across the sidewalk. Hey, kidnappers, he thought, you want to get me back? This would be a great time to snatch me away. He shivered, even though it wasn't the least bit cold for October. I should have told Mom and Dad, he thought, about that second letter, if nothing else. But he knew why he hadn't. They would have made a federal case out of it, getting upset, calling the cops. Jonah didn't want that. Like Catherine, he wanted Mom and Dad to stay normal, and now he really couldn't tell them. Not when they were already so freaked out by the meeting with Mr. Reardon. It would be cruel to spring this on them, too. The street curved slightly, and there was a break in the trees, so he had a full view of his own house. Mom had chrysanthemums planted along the sidewalk, along the front fence, which was actually white picket. Mom and Dad were such believers in all those cliches. The living room bay window curved out invitingly. The lights blazed. Home looked like such a safe place. Jonah just wanted to walk in, crawl into bed, pull the covers over his face, and sleep until all the scary things in his life disappeared. He glanced longingly up at the two second-story windows that looked into his room. The lights weren't on in his room, but light was spilling in from the hallway, so he could make out dim shapes, his dresser, his desk, the posts of his bed. One of the shapes in his room moved. While Jonah watched, a person, eased the door of Jonah's room shut, blocking out the light, plunging the windows into complete darkness. But then a smaller light, a flashlight, a pen light, clicked on, hovering over Jonah's desk. Jonah took off running.